Good day. Welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. I'm John Marino, and we are produced by Sharc Creative, made possible by Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities right through the spring of 2021. Also by Lipolis Electric. At Lipolis, don't be left in the dark. They'll get you out of the dark at Lipolis. Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard. And White Plains Hospital. At White Plains, we say thank you to all of our heroes for all they've done throughout the COVID pandemic. Here on the Beat in Westchester, we are joined by John Bailey. John Bailey is the publisher, editor of White Plains CitizenNet Reporter, WhitePlainsCitizenNetReporter.com. John covers White Plains to a T and the entire county of Westchester like no one else. John Bailey, welcome back to Westchester
very nice.
Talk Radio.
Very nice of you to say so. Very nice of you to say so.
By the way,
I'm good. I'm very upbeat and you always feel good when you have a good news weekend. You know, you do a couple of stories that nobody else does. Mm-hmm. And I mean, nobody else does. And that's always satisfying because, as Pete Hamill wrote, news is a verb.
And give us a couple of those stories that no one else had, but you did.
Well, we approved the telecommunications ordinance that suddenly appeared out of nowhere last week. On Thursday, it was revealed that they were going to put it on the agenda. It was a revised ordinance to deal with the proliferation of new cell phone towers in White Plains.
All right, so how did this come up all of a sudden? Yeah. Why all of a sudden?
Well, because some activists in the city have been very upset about it for about 7 or 8 months now, and they've had several Zoom meetings featuring experts saying how studies they have done, a professor from the University of Montreal and another national researcher have shown that it really high frequency radiation from cell towers has a tendency to really cause less brain development in children and loss of it in adults. But there is great concern that the high intensity of 5G sent throughout a community into residential neighborhoods and whatever, into apartment buildings, whatever, will damage people long term. But of course, there's not a lot of research for or against it. There's just opinions and surveys saying there's no damage, and then there's the other studies that have been done that says there has been a lot of damage.
So can surveys like this, and you know there are these surveys before a bill like this passes by whomever gets hired, can these surveys, or is this an oxymoron type of question by me, be geared and engineered to reflect what the survey taker wants to see and wants to show?
I said this morning. But I mean, this is the whole problem with consulting in general. Like,
how do you get to a happy medium, though? One survey shows totally this. The other survey from the other side shows totally that. So how do you get to a happy medium in a situation?
Well, the government usually steps in on an issue and funds a survey, which they did. And as late as 2018, they came up with this survey that finds that there is definitely damage, but nobody's paying attention to it because the telecommunications people are rushing to put up these towers, to put up 5G, which is supposedly going to send us into the 22nd century. And,
okay, so in the city of White Plains, it seems like, and this has gone on for decades to me, It seems like it takes a long time to get things done. Why? Too many competing interests?
Well, in terms of development, I would say yes. You know,
And the
you've
rest?
got the finance, yes. You get a project approved in White Plains, and then you need financing. It used to be people would have financing in place, but now they don't because of the COVID and the depression left over from 2008. And so banks are being a lot more picky as to whether or not a project is viable or not. And that's why development is not starting on time in White Plains. And also, White Plains does take a long time to go over things with developers. Now, in this ordinance, this was originally the Verizon towers were eventually were approved about last year or so, and then now they've been launching new cell tower placement requests and there was a rush to get an ordinance done to deal with this new technology, and it was protested by 5G Westchester and the activist Ruth Moss, and who directed several seminars via Zoom pointing out these dangers. She consulted with the mayor, and the mayor said he would look into this, and they came up with an ordinance, and the ordinance was put out just last week. It was never discussed in a public hearing. Never. And
was that a mistake not to discuss it in a public hearing?
Not for the city that wanted to approve it, right?
Right.
Best thing to do is
what
not
about for you and me? Doesn't the city work for you and me?
Well, I once almost got slugged by a state senator because I told him that when he said something nasty about what I could do with my criticism. And I said, wait a minute, you work for me. You shouldn't treat me like that. He had to be held back by a representative. That's how egotistical some of these politicians are. Mm-hmm. They say they care, they say they're listening, and we hear you, and we are mindful. What are some other key buzzwords that they say? We are aware. We understand the issues, but they really don't care. They do what they want.
Is it best when a public official feels like he could be fired by the electorate next time around if he doesn't get the job done? Is that the base of the problem, that too many public officials don't have that fear of getting kicked out next time around?
Well, that's because we live in a sphere of influence situation. In White Plains, the Republican Party does not comment on issues. We don't have any prominent Republicans. Only one person has stepped forward to run for Common Council when there are 3 seats available of incumbents. And we don't even know his name, even though I've asked several times hey, are you serious? You nominate someone for Common Council, you don't announce a name, you don't give a press release out, you don't confirm it. That's the Republican Party. And it's that way in Westchester County, too, the county level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is hardly any Republican Party to speak of countywide right now.
Well, that's because they're basically not Republicans. They just sort of cooperate with the status quo. And at least my opinion, we are living in a sphere of influence where basically 2 parties are really one.
All parties are one.
Yeah, that's right. And they're
all parties
they work to preserve everybody else's jobs.
Right.
Right. Their own. And
COVID.
That's right. COVID.
Numbers seem to be going down locally around Westchester, and that obviously is due to the vaccine and obviously all the stringent guidelines and more. How are we making out? Do we seem now finally to be heading in the right direction, knowing that this could change as we speak?
Well, as County Executive Latimer said Monday, the hospitalizations are really much farther down than they had been. He said there were 116 like through Saturday. And this is really good news because I took the number of people infected with COVID 3 weeks ago and figured out it'd take them 15 days to come down with it to the point where they might be hospitalized. And lo and behold, the number of hospitalizations for this past weekend equaled 3% based on an extrapolation going back 3 weeks.
So all right, so that's great news. We're heading the right direction.
3%,
but
that's right.
Is there a but in there at all that you see right now, or no buts about it? We are heading the right way.
The but, as everybody is now aware of, is not everybody is vaccinating on a good pace. And mid-Hudson region of the 7 counties, of which Westchester is one, only 23% of the other counties are vaccinated. And Westchester,
that's a low number. It's not Brazil or India, but that's a strikingly low number, knowing that Westchester is what, above 60 now?
40%. And we got 500,000 more where you had one shot. So we are well on the way to getting over 50%, I would say, by the end of May. Easily.
And yet you take Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, Ulster, Orange, Sullivan, and that averages 23%?
Yes, 23%.
So how do we get over the hump then at this point, knowing herd immunity is 80 to 85%? I use that figure based off NBA and Major League Baseball teams who are using 85% of their players and organizational employees to get vaccinated before they reduce their own in-house, in-team, in-league restrictions. That tells me the number is not 70 for herd immunity like we many times hear that it is, this number that we've heard thrown around, about 85% to be extra safe. A new survey out a few days ago shows that with the Americans who've been vaccinated and those who still intend to get vaccinated, for herd immunity, we're not going to get close. We're going to get up to not even 2/3, maybe 65% to be vaccinated overall when all is said and done. So we're about 50%, like you say, in Westchester, 23% the rest of the Hudson Valley. Those numbers for being safe in the long run, I'm not a mathematician,
but Westchester don't add up. Westchester has a third of the population of the Mid-Hudson region.
Right.
We have 1 million. And the other 6 counties have 2. But
they have most combined.
Yes.
Of the lower Hudson Valley population. Westchester is a 1/3 portion.
Yes, but I mean, I don't understand. But really, there have not been that many places up in those other 6 counties to get vaccinated, which I think a couple of representatives of that area have complained about. We need a larger vac site here in Rockland or Dutchess. And
do we need to pass a law to get everybody vaccinated, as dictatorial as that may seem?
Well, you have to be vaccinated with the vaccines to go to school for things like smallpox, measles, stuff like that. You have to do that. That's the law. Otherwise, you can't go to public school. Now, I see no reason, since that has not been tested in the Supreme Court yet. God, I hope nobody heard me say that. But I see no reason, if you start seeing the infection rate go up, as we now have this big rush by the state legislature to open everything they possibly can.
So all of a sudden it's, let's forget about what happened in the last 14 months.
Have they looked at India?
Yeah,
please.
Which is what I say.
That's what India did. That's exactly what
we have the
India
Indian strain here in 13 states already, including Michigan and California.
Oh, so I didn't realize
how do we deal with this? We want to reopen, but we have this new strain coming in. We now limit people, restrict people from coming in from India. Who knows where else it spreads in that region? People come here from there. How do we finally get out of this 14-month mess, or is this not get outable of?
Well, I think it's going to be mutating for quite a while. It obviously is a very It's probably a Russian virus this time. You know, that is a very bad joke. But the thing would be, to my way of thinking, that it's not over. People have to get vaccinated. And of course, the big problem is whether or not the vaccines that I have, and probably you have by now, can handle the new variants.
Right. We don't know that yet.
We don't know that.
I'm vaccinated. I passed my 14 days after the second vaccination yesterday. So technically, I'm supposedly safe, but I'm not taking any chances for a number of months because we don't know. This is all brand new, and there's a lot more, I think, still to come. Can we legislate around an actual law that says you have to be vaccinated? For example, you got to be vaccinated to get into the schools. If we post a sign that says everywhere in a restaurant, you can't come in unless you show proof of vaccination, is that a way of working around the problem and making sure, encouraging people to get vaccinated, as opposed to, say, giving them a gift card to go get vaccinated? Gee, thanks, or buying them a drink like I think Ned Lamont wants to do in Connecticut?
Well, yes, I think it is. If you make a reservation for a restaurant, they have to say, are you vaccinated? And you need to bring proof. Otherwise, we will not let you in. But that would take guts on the part of the state legislature to do that. And as we don't know, they only have guts when they can kick a person who is down. That's
and notice the middle ground they're playing, that we have to stay safe, but let's open everything anyway.
Well, that's not safe to do.
They're not taking sides.
No. It's not safe to do.
Isn't that what politicians do? They, in many ways, don't take sides.
They want to be liked.
Yeah.
They want to be liked. Oh, like me, I'm for you, but they're not.
And
they just
want to get
their job
too. Yeah.
But I've said this before, and it's getting old but I just have to keep educating the public that you can't believe what your politician says to you in neighborhood meetings, when they talk to you, and because they are saying what you want to hear. They make a science of this.
Vaccines. Do we have too many around Westchester now? Do we have supply outpacing demand? Which to me is a good thing in a way to have. We know we have a lot of vaccines, but we need that demand to get up.
We may have the demand, but you have to step up the ability to vaccinate faster in order to start moving this along. I once figured you were figuring that they needed to vaccinate a tremendous number of people to get vaccinated by September when school opens.
Right.
Yeah, September is doing inoculations at a much faster rate than they're doing now. And it's not just because people aren't showing up.
Why?
There are lots of pop-ups. There are lots of pharmacies giving it. I mean, they're all over the place now. And they try and get people to come in. People aren't showing up. But then on the other hand, we are not taking the vaccines to them either.
Right, which is a way to make sure everybody
house to house
vaccinated.
How about vaccination?
Getting it out there and around. Yeah.
They got to take it to them because people aren't coming in because they're getting complacent.
Now, you talked about White Plains a few minutes ago, the new telecommunications measure. The state budget, we'll talk about that momentarily. Let's talk about the White Plains budget first. What's going on with that?
Well, it's a very, very low tax rate increase, and it is only going up about 1.5% to 2%. And so this is quite acceptable. I mean, the tax increase for middle home is middle value home, about 650,000, 700,000. It's only going to be about a $80, $90 increase. Not bad, and one can live with that. And the city has done a good job. They've kept the services going during COVID, and they've actually cut the number of employees. So there's nothing to really complain about.
Mm-hmm.
I
The
mean,
White Plains residents understand, like you said, it's not much of an increase, that this is a pandemic and that we have to reach in our pockets maybe a little bit more to help us economically get out of this.
Well, John, what has changed the budget situation is the American Relief Act and the fact that the New York State is probably getting millions, which are being given away by the state legislature.
Mm-hmm. We were getting 12.5
who are now taking credit
15.
for this. They're taking credit for getting us all this money, but it wasn't. It was simply Congress passing it.
Governor says we have to raise taxes, that he needs $15 billion. The feds are supplying with the stimulus bill, $12.5 billion, 12.5 in the stimulus bill.
Yes,
is this an acceptable reason for the state to raise taxes too?
Well, it is my opinion that we would have had to raise taxes in Westchester County exponentially if we hadn't got all that COVID aid, which bailed them out of their 60 million deficit or so. And remember, they thought they were going to get 747 million in sales taxes, and they only got about 680 million. So there's a deficit that's covered. They used the COVID payment that they got to cover that by putting COVID into the reserve fund and using the reserve fund to pay off last year's deficit. And now in White Plains, we were down 9 million in sales tax as of last month. And that we would have had to have made that up had we not gotten the new aid. So ARA, the American Relief Act, has bailed out the county. They have bailed out towns, and they have bailed out New York State. It just has. And now the very fact that you're telling they want to raise taxes. Well, this is the last act of Governor Cuomo's government career. He is going to raise the taxes because he will be blamed for it, but he probably is not going to run again. So therefore, he takes the onus off the legislature for doing that. And next year, the legislature doesn't have to do that.
You talk about moving money around to cover gaps. Does this come back to bite us eventually?
Well, they're
like a Ponzi scheme?
Well, it's basically what the government did for Wall Street and the banks back in 2008. The government now is doing for the states. And I mean, it's using new debt to pay for what money they don't have and just putting it onto future generations. It's always the way government does it. O'Rourke did this back in 1993. Remember, he took a whole bunch of money to cover his deficit and put it into next year or something like that. He originated the fungible asset.
Right, fungible assets. City of New York does it. They've done that with pension funding last year to this year. And
but I find it disingenuous that the legislature is sending all this money out to so many towns and so many people, as if we're doing this. They are just passing it along.
John Bailey is the publisher, editor of White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, whiteplainscitizennetreport.com. I'm John Marino, Westchester Talk Radio, produced by Sharc Creative on the Beat in Westchester. John Bailey, the state budget was not complete last time we spoke a few weeks back. It's finally done. Your thoughts on the finished product? You talked about taxes. How about the rest of it? Marijuana legalization, online gaming legalization here in New York. We all know what it's about. It's about raising tax money to help fill that gap that we discussed. and
raising
other
revenue.
controversial
Yeah.
issues in there too. How do you think the state budget stacks up? Did all sides get something of what they want?
Well, look, everybody gets what they want in New York State, except the disabled. The disabled are overlooked, and they are not supported, and they are also a target for the most cuts. And I find it a sin that the bravest persons in the state are the disabled, and they're also the nicest. They never insult you. They never attempt to hurt you. They accept pain without question. They're very tough individuals, and I find it despicable that the OMWDD is not been given a large ass and money to pay their workers better. In fact, they haven't even vaccinated people that work in the group homes. They just haven't. They've
How could that
vaccinated
be?
the
Aren't they
residents.
supposed to go first, top of the list, at least close?
That's what I thought. The disabled have been vaccinated. The disabled clients in group homes have been vaccinated. But many of the workers who take care of them, in one of the toughest jobs anybody can do, they haven't been vaccinated. Now,
So
I
whose
don't know.
fault is that?
I don't know whether it's because they chose not to, or whether it's because there's not been an effort to vaccinate them. There should have been.
Not everyone who works for a hospital or for a facility, like you've just pointed out, wants to get vaccinated. Is there a way to work around that, knowing that these are places of high transmission, and the more the merrier when it comes to vaccinations?
Well, I don't think a person that refuses to get vaccinated in a hospital setting, a person that works for a hospital, I don't think they should continue to be employed. Just make it a condition. Look, you like this job, we like what you do, but you have to be vaccinated.
Right, that's the requirement
Take
of
it
the
to
job.
the courts. Take it to the courts. Do it, because that was part of the main reason why it was so slow getting vaccinated. Because
so is this the legislature's fault too, not passing a law, whether it be statewide or maybe governments locally and towns and municipalities and cities
the
and
governor,
and villages saying you want to work in a hospital where we are, you got to be vaccinated. Want to work in a senior facility, you got to be vaccinated.
Well, in retrospect, perhaps they should have. They overlooked that situation. One always assumed that if the vaccines were available, you would vaccinate your workers. They don't do things that they should do because it costs money. They took people back in from hospitals because they didn't want to lose the revenue. They did that because, as the governor has made that point many times, and quite frankly, this whole nursing home thing that the state legislature has made an issue of is ludicrous, because no one lobbies the state more than nursing homes. They're very big lobbyists. They have a very strong presence, and they give a lot to politicians.
So when you say that our politicians, our legislators, our elected leaders overlooked this, making sure everybody gets vaccinated, could it have been because of
somebody overlooked it?
Lobbying?
Somebody overlooked it.
People got lobbied and they lost their memories for a little bit.
Look, I feel very sorry for the congressperson who is the legislator whose, I believe his mother died or something, and he was really rightly upset. However, it is not the governor's fault. It was the nursing home's fault. And we have to, and Andrea Stewart Cousins said she's going to investigate. They passed a whole bunch of new restrictions on nursing homes and hoops they have to jump through. But how about calling a hearing, calling the nursing homes in on the carpet and have them testify what happened? And then you might get to the bottom. It's like when they canceled the assessment tests a few years ago for a new creator, and they did not call the previous creator in to say why the tests were good. No, they never did that because they might have learned something. They don't want to learn something. They just want something to show that we're doing our job because we're holding a hearing, but nothing happens. And
like they say, you're never too, like my mother used to tell me, you're never too old to learn.
Well, politicians don't.
John, police reform was part of the April 1st mandate with the budget. We didn't get the budget on April 1. That's nothing new for New York, but that police reform mandate for April 1st from the governor for towns, municipalities, all forms of governmental administrations, et cetera, throughout the state of New York, villages, hamlets, et cetera, counties, everybody had to have a police reform plan for the governor on his desk by then. How well did that work?
Well, we haven't heard anything about it as far as implementing it. We have our plan here, and I think it'll be, as everything is done in White Plains, New York, USA, done very quietly. I mean, I haven't seen the police union objecting to it. I haven't seen the Commissioner of Public Safety objecting to any of it, because
I haven't heard a word.
No, and why is that? Because the White Plains Police Department has not had a death of a minority person due to a policeman firing his gun since 2011.
Wow.
That's 10 years ago. There hasn't been an act of violence by the police against a minority or any person for that matter. So they put their house in order after the Chamberlain tragedy.
Right, a decade ago that was.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago. And so that is why we don't have too many police problems in White Plains. Not only that, but when DMX died and they had at least 3,000-4,000 people over there on a regular basis mourning him outside White Plains Hospital,
right.
The police were there making sure traffic got by, and in a situation that was volatile, a powder keg of disappointment, no incidents. And nobody reported how great the White Plains Police handled that situation, except me.
Mm-hmm. DMX, of course, passing away a few weeks back. Legendary rapper, hip-hop artist,
yes.
Born in Mount Vernon, raised in Yonkers, died at White Plains Hospital, and you could say he was a Westchester guy all the way around, obviously, with his connections to Mount Vernon and also to New Rochelle and Yonkers and White Plains, the lower portion of the county. Over in White Plains and throughout Westchester and the lower Hudson Valley, this month we have school board elections. The one in White Plains shapes up as a pretty interesting showdown. It seems like somebody's going to get lost and left off the carousel. I guess when you have 4 candidates for 3 spots, like putting a square peg into a round hole, somebody gets left out.
Well, we don't know too much about this person that is running. The League of Women Voters only mentioned her first name. No, her last name, not her first, which I thought was really bad. How about naming all 4 candidates when they put out the forum notice that they're going to have next Tuesday? I mean,
you know what they say, though? What's in a name?
What's in a name? Well, what I would like to know is some background on them before we go into the human. I mean, the League of Women Voters have a very high opinion of their forums, but they're not very good. They select the questions to ask. They do not take questions from the floor. And so therefore it becomes typical White Plainsian. Everybody treats each other nicely. Nobody gets into any real issues. They ask you what you think, but you don't have that head-to-head confrontation. And we have seen what a good debate situation can do. I mean, President Trump got a lot of votes by his performance in his debate.
What are the issues for the White Plains School Board, if you're a candidate, if you're running incumbent or not, that you should be talking about and dealing with so we know?
Well, the issues are, this is not a good time to run to get on the seat school board as a newcomer, replacing the present board, which has been on there for about 5 or 6 years.
Why? Because
no
of
change. No, because the school district has done a very good job, and the board gets credit for that. And everybody thinks the superintendent whom this board hired is wonderful, and he's very good, Dr. Joseph Ricca. Thank goodness we hired this guy instead of an old retread who's a retiree, just picking up an extra money besides their pension, which is very typical around the tri-state area. No, we hired Dr. Ricca from Elmsford, and Dr. Ricca has risen to the occasion and basically provided a model for how to handle COVID in a public school system of a large one, 7,200 students, 1,400 staff and teachers. And he convinced the teachers about remote learning. They worked hard. They got it together, in about a week or two last spring. And then he ran the hybrid model, and then he devised a plan to get them back into school for the last quarter. And that's what has happened. And so far, so good. The infection rate of the district since COVID began has only been 4%.
Do you think all kids will be back in school in White Plains and around Westchester by the end of this school year? Or
in White Plains, they're back in now.
They're back in totally now.
Totally now. However, the percentage is about like 70-30. In other words, some kids are being kept home for the remote learning, but that's their choice.
Right. And some kids can still learn from home, correct? Remotely? Yeah.
Yeah, people are worried. So if you're really worried, maybe you have an elementary child and you're really worried, but I got to tell you, you're not going to keep your teenager home because it's a tough situation. They're tough enough to deal with anyway. But
and with White Plains schools in mind, a few days away, the annual Glen D. Laux Track and Field Games at White Plains High, Mother's Day weekend, Thursday through Saturday, May 6th through the 8th this year. There were no games a year ago due to the pandemic. The games are in reduced capacity this year. We're not going to have over at White Plains High School the 3,000 student athletes from 300 schools from throughout the tri-state area, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Canada, the islands, the Bahamas, etc., Massachusetts, and beyond. We are going to have there at White Plains High a reduced amount of only Section 1, Section 9 schools and athletes. That's 7-county lower Hudson Valley area, Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, Ulster, Sullivan, and Orange. And yet there will be competition at White Plains with the Laux games, and that's always good. We have people outdoors and doing outdoorsy things.
Sitting around in groups, BSing. While they're waiting to perform.
Mm-hmm.
The little groups around those track meets that sit around and chit-chat, and, well, that has to be addressed. How are they going to do that? I don't think you can have the usual but I mean, sports are supposedly back to normal with social distancing. We don't yet have any numbers. How many infections have come out of that? And that's a little bit of a problem. I think they have to address that. But the Laux games is a lot of people, and I hadn't even thought of that.
No fans this year. No fans allowed.
No fans.
No fans.
But you've still got the athlete problem.
Right. You still have hundreds of athletes who will come.
And there's a lot of boredom in a track meet, man. You're just sitting around.
But they'll be moving in and out, actually. Your event, you come in for your event, you get done, and pretty much you're going to be out of there pretty quickly enough.
Well, I'm sure they put in some sort of protocols to run a track meet of that size. But
many protocols, that I know.
It's tough keeping on. The protocols for us ordinary citizens change every 24 hours. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the restaurant situation is not going to be helpful. But now the other thing is theater. When do they open the theaters? The lifeblood of the New York's economy is the theaters. And
tourists.
But you can't produce a show for the money it costs to produce a regular show without getting massive wage concessions from the unions. If you can only have half the theater full, this is a problem. And I mean,
will the unions give in and help out, do you think? Or
I'm sure they don't want to, otherwise we'd be seeing more shows. There's one show they're going to redo, I think, the Maryland on the something like a hot, they're going to call it Sugar or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I've only heard of 2 shows that are being mounted for next year, 2022. 2.
And that's something else, obviously, with the restaurants, Broadway, the theaters, even local theaters around the Hudson Valley and the tri-state area. We got to do something to get them back so they survive, and yet we have to be mindful of all the protocols and the situation, too.
Well, Archbishop Stefanak is going to have the first theater production in some time since COVID, when they're doing the Pippin for 4 days in June in an outdoor
in White Plains,
setting.
At Archbishop Stefanak High School.
Yes, tremendous idea, and we look forward to seeing how that's going to be staged. But if they can
indoors, outdoors, any idea?
It's going to be outdoors.
Outdoors, there you go. Okay, so we have louts.
I mean, otherwise you can't. But things may change. It's only like the 4th of May, and they may, as if the infection rate does not go up,
right?
Then everybody will say it's okay, but.
Yeah, there's still time for that. We'll see. So we have louts on the agenda. We have Pippin at Stepanak on the agenda. How about our parks and beaches this summer of 2021? Right, Playland, we understand, will be opened, maybe in a bit of a reduced capacity, not as many people, lots of ongoing cleaning throughout the day and the night.
50%, I think, is what they're going to open up Playland for, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's under the new restriction, relaxed restrictions. And this would be good. That would mean on a holiday weekend like July, you would have maybe 7,000 attendance. Since some of our best numbers on holiday weekends are like 13,000 to 13 to 15,000. For the weekend, for the 3 days, and
the other parks and
big money weekends.
Too.
Yes, but
same way.
7,000 was the capacity for that parking lot, there, and so you could only theoretically fit in 3,500 a day. So there you go. You got 10,000 visitors instead of 15,000 or 20,000 if you really filled up the parking lot. So it may
not be everybody in for a swim this summer off the beaches, but at least some people will kind of dip their toes in the water, right?
But of course the Playland pool is no longer available because they started demolitioning that to be ready in a year and a half, which I'll believe it when I see it.
There's a lot going on, much to consider, a lot of moving parts. As they say.
But the pool is costing you a ton of money. I think they're spending $40 million on it. I mean, that's what's top of my head. I knew it once, but there's so many figures floating around.
All I can say is if you dip your toes in the water, just beware. A lot of sharks out there around the tri-state area now that are being tracked the past few years. The waters are much cleaner, so I go to Long Beach on Long Island, and I'm pretty leery about stepping in the water there. Sharks were sighted last year off the water.
Swim
pandemic.
Water. You cannot swim over your head off of Long Island and off Cape Cod these days.
I'm thinking don't go beyond knee deep out now.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, you got these teenage sharks though that don't observe the protocols. With the parent,
I like to, when I go to
say,
Long Beach in Nassau County, I like to talk to the fishermen on the beach and see what they're catching when I walk around. And about 3 years ago, young guy had a couple of lines cast out on a Sunday afternoon, and I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, what's running today?" And he said, "And flounder and bluefish and sharks." I said, "Sharks?" He said, "Yeah, sharks." I said, "Sharks come in close to the pier here at Long Beach?" He said, "Yeah, they do." And I looked at him like he was nuts. And then he turned to me and he said, "Why, just because you don't hear about it on Fox News, it can't be?" And then he turned and picked up his fishing poles and walked away. I stood there and I thought about that. I said, maybe a bit off his rocker. But as we found out, he was right. The sharks were coming in close to shore in Long Beach and throughout the tri-state area. Last summer in the Long Island Sound, from Westchester to the eastern end of Connecticut, there were at least 6 sharks being tracked. So all I say is, word to the wise, watch your step.
Shark Patrol.
Don't want to have a sequel of Jaws.
This is something voters have to be aware of. When I was a kid, my parents had a boat. We boated on Long Island Sound. We'd drop into a sinkhole off Mount Sinai and stay the afternoon and swim off the boat or anchor off someplace. You can't do that. It's very dangerous because you're in the deep water then.
Right.
And
well, deep waters is what we always seem to be in around Westchester, regardless if times are good, bad, or somewhere in between. We seem to be getting out of the COVID funk step by step, but still, I think, a long way to go, much to be seen, much to do, much might still happen. John Bailey, what are you looking for in Westchester County and around the region as we head towards summer 2021 now?
Well, what am I looking forward to doing, or what am I hoping for?
What are you hoping? What do you think is going to happen?
I'm hoping I can get over the COVID fear. I'm hoping I can get over my fear of being in crowds and people without masks. I'm hopeful that I can get rid of my suspicions of people and strangers. And I think that has been a tremendous toll on me mentally, always worrying about it and doing interviews with masks on. I mean, it's not fun to do. And I think the best discovery that COVID has brought us is the miracle of Zoom, because it enables more opportunities to interview people who are busy, who do not feel threatened by the Zoom, and don't feel they'll be surprised or they'll be treated badly. It's their choice. And Zoom has done a great deal for
we
promoting
can do
news.
all of what we do on Zoom here together. We have to thank Zoom for that, for being able to Zoom each other in.
Well, Zoom has done a great job of improving things in a year. Right. I mean, the quality of Zoom is really, I'd say, network quality now. And it's very good. And in fact, we actually do more interviews with Zoom than the news media do. And they're longer and more in-depth.
Right.
And Zoom has been able to do that. You can interview a person for an hour if they'll stay. It's easy. You get a politician on, you can keep them on an hour if you're nice.
Some request an hour too sometimes when you suggest 20, 30 minutes and they say, "Oh, aren't we going to do an hour?" At which point we do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but
of course we are.
The best, you have to really organize your questions. You know, that's the thing. And it's always, I always give questions in advance to an interviewee, because that way he won't be surprised and he'll give thoughts to it. But when you have to ask them short and quick in a 28-minute set, and I find that moves it along, doesn't give them quite enough time to think. Nothing is worse than a really long question that is asked by the press corps in Albany all the time, and the governor drops his jaw and say, "What was the first part of your question?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, geez, it's
He's buying time, I think, too, when he does that.
no, but he has handled. Look, those press conferences until all these girls he wanted to date have accused them of harassing her and them, and but of course, look, he wasn't in a corporate situation. When you're in corporate, there's always this sort of flirting that goes on. This is my day, and I mean, when I look back on some of my behavior when I was working in corporations, I say, my God, I would have been fired in today's atmosphere.
Times have changed, right, John?
Oh, man, there was a production person I used to go up to see who was just beautiful, tremendously competent. And I switched from a messy desk downstairs to absolute pristine desk. I started wearing suits. I changed my life.
Right, and this was
but it could have been harassment. It could have been harassment.
Uh-huh.
I mean, John, how many times could you discuss the same production change on a mechanical, you know?
As many times as you need to, right?
Exactly.
John Bailey, we'll talk again in a few weeks. Between now and then, what do you think might happen with Governor Andrew Cuomo and his situation?
Well, as we were talking before the show, I see when you start seeing some of his trusted team resign, that is an indication that he has secretly told them that he's not going to run and to look for another job.
Interesting.
I might be wrong, but they have worked so hard for him. They have saved New York State, despite what the know-nothing legislators say, because they didn't want the responsibility. They dumped it all on him, so they could not be blamed for making people unhappy. And he took the hit, and now he's being assailed as a pariah based on no court actions leveled against him. He has not been accused, and now we're having 70 witnesses interviewed by by Letitia James in her quote probe unquote.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens, but my feeling is the way he's being treated now, way these accusations, I wash my hands, I saddle up, and I ride into the sunset. And when it goes bad, they will have the likes of all these people who are Democrats now. There is the possibility that Mr. Latimer ran for governor.
Right.
If
Cuomo
decides not to run. That's the logical choice because, you know, he can do no wrong.
John Bailey, thank you, as always, and we'll talk again soon in a few weeks here on Westchester Talk Radio. See what comes up between now and then. Likely much. John Bailey is the publisher and editor of White Plains Citizen Net Reporter. Find him online at White Plains Citizen Net Reporter.com. We are Westchester Talk Radio, produced by Sharc Creative on the Beat in Westchester. I'm John Marino, and we are made possible by Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities through the spring of 2021. By Wartburg Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Mount Vernon. By Park Sterling Realty in Bronxville, and by Michael Labriola Landscape Design and Construction in Armonk. Catch all of our Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube.